She kissed him like I wasn't in the room. Not just a kiss, a kiss. The kind that makes people pretend to check their phones just to give their own eyes somewhere else to go. You know that sound a room makes when everyone's embarrassed, but nobody wants to be the first to say it? That sharp little inhale and the fake laughter that follows. That's what happened after my wife grabbed her boss by the tie, my wife, and kissed him long enough for me to count the seconds between clenched teeth. I didn't stop her. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Just stood there, sipping my sparkling water like I'd been watching a TED Talk on betrayal. Then came the toast. She pulled away from him with this smug, tipsy grin, clinked her glass against a bottle someone was still holding mid-sip, and said it loud enough to echo off the chandelier. This is what a real man feels like. She looked right at me as she said it. Her hand lingered on her boss's chest, like I was supposed to crumble in public. Like that line would shatter me into some cliché of middle-aged fragility. She wanted me to react, to throw something, to yell, maybe storm out like a sitcom husband who can't handle the heat. Instead, I smiled. A soft, patient smile. The kind you give a child when they think they've won a game you stopped playing hours ago. I set my glass down, adjusted the cuffs of my jacket, and walked out through the side door. No one stopped me. No one followed. But someone did watch. Because I knew the cameras were rolling. Not the security ones. Those were expected. I mean the event videographer she insisted on hiring for memories. The footage would be sharp, clean, multiple angles, high-resolution proof. The moment she became a meme and didn't even know it yet. Outside, the cold slapped my face awake like a cruel parent. I didn't shiver. I got in the car, plugged in my phone, and opened the file I'd preloaded 2 weeks ago. One message. Drafted. Ready. Attached with something that took me months to gather and weeks to format without leaving digital fingerprints. Not rage. Just receipts. The subject line was simple. Thought you should have the full picture. I hit send. To one recipient. Just one. Then I sat there for a minute, watching the frost creep over the windshield, letting the silence fill the space she tried to claim with her theater back there. Here's the funny thing. Madison always underestimated silence. She thought quiet meant weak. That not shouting back meant I had nothing to say. But quiet is where I work best. It's where the plans get written. It's where precision lives. A small favor. If you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, consider doing it. Most people don't, but it helps more than you know, and it's what keeps stories like this coming. Anyway, the party would go on for another hour, maybe 2. The alcohol would flow. Madison would keep laughing just a bit too loud. Her boss would think he scored some kind of victory, being the man of the hour with the scandalous trophy wife in his arms. They wouldn't realize it yet, but something shifted, because what I sent wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a message. It was a lever. And Madison? She handed me the fulcrum the second she said, "This is what a real man feels like." No one saw the text go out. No one saw the footage upload in the background. But it didn't matter. The countdown had already started. And at 3:48 a.m., someone would wake up to find out exactly what a real man is capable of. Especially when he's been underestimated long enough to build an escape route beneath the stage everyone else is dancing on. That night, while they celebrated, I slept like a man who had already left the house on fire. The call came at 3:48 a.m. The exact timestamp was carved into her memory like a bad tattoo, permanent and irritating, just beneath the skin. Madison jolted awake to the shrill vibration of her phone on the nightstand, groggy and still half drunk on champagne and self-importance. She blinked at the screen. Unknown number. No voicemail. Just a steady ring, like someone who knew she'd answer anyway. She did. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "Don't say anything yet," the woman said. "No introduction. No emotion. I'm not asking questions. Just check your email. Right now. Before you speak to anyone, not even him." Click. Just like that. The line went dead. The silence afterward was suffocating. Madison sat there for a second, heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to escape her body. She thought about ignoring it. Thought about rolling back over and chalking it up to some drunken prank. But her instincts, those dormant little alarm bells she usually shut off with wine and sarcasm, started screaming. She got up, still in her dress from the party, heels kicked halfway across the room, and padded over to her laptop. The screen glowed like it had something to confess. She opened it, still half asleep, her fingers trembling slightly against the trackpad. Inbox. One new message. No subject preview. Just a name she barely recognized until it clicked. Alan. Not her Alan. Not the way she used to say it with affection or even annoyance. Just Alan. Like a signature on a notice to vacate. She clicked. The email body was one line. This should help your team understand what lines were crossed. A. Below it, a single folder attachment. Labeled, crossing_lines.zip. She hesitated, then double-clicked. Inside, 3 audio recordings, 2 screen captures, and 1 PDF. All time-stamped. All linked to internal company comms. Her voice. Her laughter. Her calling Alan dead weight. On a Slack channel she thought was private. Her discussing strategic partnerships with Eric, her boss, while sipping wine in a hotel bar. Time-stamped. Tracked. Tied to pre-merger non-disclosure windows. And then the killer, one short video clip. Just 39 seconds long. Security cam angle. Holiday party. Her kiss. Her toast. Her words echoing crystal clear. This is what a real man feels like. In the bottom corner of the screen, a tiny, nearly imperceptible reflection. Alan's face. Expressionless. Watching. She closed the laptop like it burned her fingers. For a long second, she just stood there, breathing like she'd run a marathon through wet concrete. The air in the room got thick, almost viscous, like the molecules themselves had turned against her. She turned on her phone again, opened the call history, searched the number, blocked. Then, finally, she called Eric. Straight to voicemail. She didn't leave one. Instead, she paced. Around the bed. Around the room. The gift bags from the party were still sitting on the dresser. Cheap wine, company swag, a tin of peppermint bark. One of the company pins rolled out and hit the floor. She stared at it like it was some kind of omen. She had mocked him, called him boring, predictable. He couldn't even be bothered to argue anymore. She thought that meant he was retreating, withdrawing, shriveling up like all the other men who get replaced by newer, glossier models. But Alan wasn't retreating. He was relocating. And now she was standing in the dark at 4 a.m., holding a laptop full of legal landmines and digital confessionals, with a stomach full of dread and a mouth that suddenly felt like sandpaper. This wasn't damage control. This was an autopsy. She opened the folder again, reread the file names, each one more damning than the last. Her eyes landed on the PDF. She hadn't opened it yet. Financial Disclosure Addendum, Clause 11B. She clicked. At the top, her name, his name, joint signature, date, 3 months ago. She remembered signing it. He told her it was standard. She didn't even read it. She was on her way out the door to a wine tasting with her team. At the bottom, a clause about financial partitions becoming irrevocable if evidence of marital breach was provided by either party. Breach. Not suspicion. Not rumor. Evidence. And now it was all zipped into one neat little folder labeled Crossing Lines. Her phone buzzed again. Private number. She didn't pick up. Not this time. She just sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the laptop, feeling the gravity of what Alan had set in motion. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a bitter husband lashing out. This was calculated. And the worst part? He hadn't even raised his voice. Monday morning began like most of them did for Alan. Coffee brewed to exact temperature, blazer brushed clean, and every folder on his desktop closed with the kind of care most people reserve for antique clocks. But this wasn't a normal Monday. This one had a very precise ending built in from the start. At 9:06 a.m., Alan walked into the office he'd worked in for 17 years. He passed by the front desk, nodded politely to the receptionist who always offered him stale candy, and entered the glass-walled HR suite with the same unassuming energy he wore every day. No grand speech. No heads-up. Just a sealed envelope marked confidential and a flash drive. The HR manager, Deborah, kind enough, but chronically distracted, looked up and blinked behind her oversized glasses. "Oh, Alan, I wasn't expecting." "I know," he said. "I won't be staying long." She opened the envelope, read the first line, and her eyebrows raised. "This is to resignation?" Alan nodded once. "Effective 90 days from today, as outlined under Section 4C of my original contract." Deborah's eyes flicked to the date, then the clause reference, then the attached document. Okay, she stammered. "That's, not typical protocol. Most people resign immediately or with 2 weeks. You've requested 90. That's correct. And as per the clause, during the exit period, I retain oversight of logistics review and vendor compliance transitions unless waived by the board. I assume they won't mind." His voice was gentle, but crisp, like he was stating a weather forecast. He placed his laptop, wiped, reset, spotless, on her desk, along with his badge. No smudges. No farewell post-it note. Just surgical closure. "I'll be working remote until the term ends. If you need anything, I'll be reachable by the same email address." And with that, he left. No hallway goodbyes. No farewell lunch. No signatures on a card. Most of them didn't even notice he was gone until someone asked why the Tuesday shipment dashboard was offline. That's when things started clicking into place. Because buried inside that resignation letter, under the polite language and predictable HR phrasings, was a trigger, an obscure clause in Alan's original hiring package that very few people ever bothered to understand. Something his boss had waved off years ago as standard legacy contract boilerplate. That clause gave Alan discretionary review over 3 specific vendor relationships during any transition period exceeding 30 days. And wouldn't you know it, those vendors were the exact ones Madison's department relied on most for a high-profile Q1 rollout. By Tuesday afternoon, one of them had already paused communications. Compliance review in progress, they said. Vague, but firm. By Wednesday, another flagged transition risk due to unclear end-of-term contacts. And by Thursday, the third sent a single email with 2 words, pending audit. No one in her office had seen it coming. Because no one thought Alan was paying attention. Especially not Madison. She still moved around their house like it was hers. She clattered dishes, left her yoga mat in the hallway, streamed garbage reality shows on full volume like she was waiting for him to flinch. But Alan didn't yell, didn't bark, didn't engage. He just sat in the study he'd quietly converted into a temporary command center and watched things unfold. Measured, methodical, quiet. On Thursday night, she finally asked, "So you resigned?" He didn't look up from his screen. "When were you going to tell me? I suppose now works." She scoffed. "Wow, just like that." Alan finally turned. "Madison, I told you the night of the party, with my silence. You chose not to hear it." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Besides," he continued, turning back to his screen, "I'm not really the dramatic exit type. I prefer quiet architecture. The kind of moves that don't make noise until it's too late to fix them." She stared at him, trying to decide if he was bluffing. She still didn't get it. The job was never the point. It was never about leaving. It was about what left with him. Vendor trust, system knowledge, relationship maps, years of silent capital. She'd mocked him for being invisible. Now she was learning what happens when the invisible man decides to move the furniture while no one's looking. And still, she thought the worst had passed. She had no idea this was just one domino, one lever. There were more. The first thing Madison noticed was the 0. She wasn't looking for it. She wasn't even thinking about finances that morning. Too busy trying to control the fallout at work, scrambling to reschedule meetings her boss had suddenly made himself unavailable for, dodging the HR director's gaze in the hallway. But around 11:12 a.m., standing in her office with half a protein bar in one hand and her phone in the other, she opened their shared investment dashboard to check the automated monthly statement. What greeted her was a void. $0. Not in one account. In all of them. She refreshed the page like a lunatic. Closed the app. Opened it again. Tried it on desktop. Same result. Empty. Her fingers started to tremble before her brain could even process why. She called the financial advisor's office before her stomach could fully drop. "Peter, it's Madison Grant. There's a mistake on the account. I logged in, and there's nothing in there." A pause. Too long. Mrs. Grant," Peter said, tone suddenly guarded. "Yes, I imagine this is regarding the restructuring your husband executed last month." "Restructuring?" she snapped. "What restructuring? Those are our accounts. Joint access. Where did the assets go?" "I'm sorry, but you approved the move." "The hell I did." Another pause. This one colder. "You signed off on Form 11B back in September. I was present for the meeting, as was your attorney. You acknowledged the shift from revocable to irrevocable upon trigger of Clause 6C. Clause 6 what? Marital breach clause, Peter said, his voice now an emotionless suit of armor. It was a conditional control handoff. Standard language in private trusts. She stood frozen in her office, staring at the glass wall, the city skyline blurring behind her. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're telling me I gave him everything?" "You didn't give him anything," Peter replied, just professional enough to sound legal proof. "You co-signed a structure that shifted control based on defined terms. Terms that were apparently triggered." Her throat dried out. "Defined triggered." Peter exhaled slowly. "I can't say for sure, ma'am. But if what's circulating in the news is true, and there's documentation of inappropriate conduct, particularly between board-adjacent parties, then I believe Clause 6C is indeed in effect. Retroactively binding." She didn't even hang up. Just dropped the phone on her desk like it had gone radioactive. Her hands flew to her laptop. She tore through her inbox like a drowning woman clawing at the surface. Search, Form 11B. Date range, September. There it was. The subject line was forgettable. Final asset structure, standard clause update. She remembered skimming it while Alan stood in the kitchen making tea. She had her shoes off, a glass of red wine on the counter. He'd walked over, handed her the tablet. Just the last thing for Peter. Before the quarter closes, he'd said. No emotion. No pressure. She signed it with her thumbprint. Never read a word of the PDF. The file opened now on her screen like a silent scream. Page 4. Section C, highlighted. Revocable control shall transition to sole beneficiary upon breach of fidelity, as evidenced by audio, digital, or visual documentation submitted to the trustee or partner. She had handed him the knife, smiling. And now? Now, the assets weren't just gone. They were sealed. The trust was closed. Peter wouldn't even have access to reverse it unless Alan authorized it. She tried to log into the secondary index account. Denied. Tried to reset the password. No recovery email sent. She pulled up a different dashboard, one she'd created for her independent account. Still active. Still hers. But tiny in comparison. Like a thimble next to a reservoir. That's when she realized what he'd done. Alan didn't drain the accounts. He rerouted the infrastructure. Quietly. Methodically. Legally. Every dollar, every bond, every dividend-yielding stock they'd built together. It was now inside a machine she couldn't even see. She thought he didn't understand money. Thought he just said it and forgot it, like those brain-dead financial advice books said. But Alan had been watching, learning, building something inside the walls. A fortress. And she had given him the key. She picked up her phone and called him. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. She left a voicemail. Her voice high, clipped, cracking around the edges. Alan, call me back. Now. We need to talk. You can't just take everything. You can't just... Alan, seriously. Call me. She sat down, shaking, her designer suit suddenly suffocating. Her reflection in the black monitor looked older. Smaller. The house. The condo. The boat. Were those inside the trust too? She didn't know. Not anymore. Because Alan didn't raise his voice. He raised his walls. And she wasn't on the inside anymore. The first email hit the operations inbox at 6:14 a.m. on Wednesday. It was polite. Almost excessively so. A Canadian vendor, one of their more dependable textile suppliers, announced they were reprioritizing partnership bandwidth for Q1 due to internal capacity reassessment, which was a very flowery way of saying we're not delivering the order you're expecting in 10 days. The order in question? $1.2 million worth of time-sensitive products slotted for a flagship relaunch Madison herself had pushed through during the last board review. A high-risk, high-reward deal that required everything to arrive in sequence. Raw materials, custom cuts, branded packaging, all perfectly timed. By 7:30 a.m., a second email arrived. This one from a shipping firm based in Ohio. They decided to pause new engagements with clients under pending compliance review. The pending part was a lie. There was nothing under review. Not yet. But the damage was starting. Madison was pulled out of her morning strategy call and asked to join a quick sync with logistics. The team lead looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Charts were crashing. Timelines skewed. And nobody could explain why the vendors, who'd never so much as delayed a delivery in 5 years, were suddenly developing cold feet at the exact same moment. She assured the team it was just a hiccup. She even said the word normalization twice. Because that's what you say when you want scared people to feel like you're in control. But inside, her gut twisted. Because these vendors? These weren't just random links in a supply chain. They were Alan's. Alan had built the supplier web from scratch after their 2013 debacle with overseas freight. He knew their customs timelines, their seasonal adjustments, even which account managers were divorcing and likely to miss an email. It was a spider web, and Alan had spun every thread himself. By Thursday afternoon, the fourth vendor pulled out. No warning. Just an automatic email, CC'd to legal. No explanation. Her boss, Eric, called her into his office. His jaw was tight. His desk was a battlefield of printed reports and empty coffee cups. What's going on? He demanded. Random churn, she said, too quickly. End-of-year pressure. Maybe some of them are jumping ship because they think the merger. No, he said sharp. This isn't churn. This is coordination. A message. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she knew. Deep down, she knew. Eric leaned back, rubbed his eyes. Alan ran all this, didn't he? He left. He doesn't have access anymore. Access? Eric snorted. Access isn't about logins. It's about people. Do you think those vendors are loyal to your corporate Slack messages? Or to the guy who got their trucks across customs on Christmas Eve and never asked for a thank you? She didn't answer. Couldn't. By Friday morning, it was officially chaos. A full 3-product rollout was halted. Marketing had to recall pre-launch media assets. One investor called Eric directly to ask if the whispers about internal sabotage were true. At 10:46 a.m., she overheard Eric in the hallway outside the operations room. His voice was low, but the building was quiet enough to carry. Whoever planned this, they didn't just quit. They sabotaged. Quietly. Months ago. And we let them walk out with a smile. Madison ducked behind a pillar and steadied herself on the drywall. Her palms were cold. Her vision tunneled. For a second, she thought she might faint. She thought it was over. The email. The trust. She thought the account freeze was the worst of it. The silence. The voicemail Alan never returned. The fact that he'd moved out last week without telling her, left behind nothing but a receipt for a storage unit and a forwarded mail form. But no, that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. Because now, it wasn't just her pride that was broken. It was her company's spine. Quietly bent. Strategically snapped. And every move traced back to someone she used to roll her eyes at over dinner. Someone who spent most of his evenings tweaking route spreadsheets, while she scrolled social media under a blanket of contempt. Alan didn't just leave. He rerouted the battlefield. And she was losing pieces she didn't even know were on the board. Her phone buzzed. A message from a vendor she hadn't spoken to in years. Just heard about the fallout. Hope you're okay. You should have kept Alan. She deleted it immediately, but it still echoed. She was waiting when he pulled into the driveway. Engine barely off, Alan spotted the silhouette. Madison, standing just outside the garage like a weathered statue carved from rage and desperation. No makeup, no mask, no company-issue performance smile. Just raw, exposed nerves and a trench coat thrown over yoga pants. Like she couldn't decide if she was there to confront him or collapse in front of him. The car hadn't even fully stopped when she yanked open the driver's side door. You had this planned, she hissed, voice low and sharp. Alan didn't flinch. He killed the engine, removed the keys with deliberate calm, and looked at her like she was just another unpredictable forecast. You humiliated me. Publicly. I planned to leave quietly. You made it loud. Madison's eyes flared. Loud? You think I made it loud? You sent a dossier to a woman who was practically my boss's wife in name only. You dismantled 3 years of vendor relationships. You froze our entire joint financial framework. Alan, you nuked my career. She was panting now, voice raised, pacing beside the hood of the car like a prosecutor trying to find the exact sentence that would get him to fold. But Alan didn't. He stepped out, calmly, and closed the car door behind him with an eerie softness. Then he opened the back seat and pulled out a manila envelope. Nothing fancy. No logo. Just a single, well-folded sheet inside. He handed it to her like he was offering takeout instructions. Clause 8, he said. Read it before your boss does. She took it, more out of reflex than willingness. Scan the top. Her eyes slowed when they hit the subheading. Ethical Governance Addendum. Fiduciary Entanglement Disclosure Policy. Alan watched her pupils twitch as she read it. That's not. This isn't active anymore, she muttered, her voice dropping an octave. Alan folded his arms. Still is. Your firm never sunset the ethics board. They just renamed it. I know. I was in the room when the clause was written. Back when governance meant something to them. She read faster now, her hand tightening on the page. Romantic relationships between personnel and their reporting line or financial counterparts must be disclosed. She read aloud. Failure to do so prior to joint engagement in vendor or M&A discussions constitutes a direct violation of fiduciary protocol. She looked up, her face pale. You're bluffing. You don't have access anymore. I don't need access, he said. I already submitted it. You what? Alan pulled his keys from his coat pocket. Anonymous tip. Audio timestamped. Emails. Strategic calendar overlaps. You two had a lot of late dinners during those tender M&A phases, didn't you? That wasn't. God, Alan, it wasn't even serious. That's the point, he said, stepping past her toward the front door. It was casual, unreported, and now it's in the hands of people whose job it is to worry about exactly that. She turned, following him. You're trying to destroy me. No, he said over his shoulder. I'm trying to finalize an audit. He stopped at the door, glanced back. You've been emotionally checked out for a year. I just formalized it. She didn't respond right away. Just stared at the document in her hand like it might catch fire. What do you want from me? Alan considered that for a moment. I wanted you to feel something, even just a flicker of shame. But now, I don't want anything from you, Madison. I'm done needing. She was quiet, her hands trembling. He could see the storm brewing in her jaw. So he twisted the knife one last time. I wonder what your compliance officer will say, he added. Or legal. Or Eric's wife, if she decides to share her copy with the press. Her lips parted. You wouldn't. I didn't, he said. You did. You just didn't know anyone was watching. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. No slam. No yell. Just the quiet click of finality. Outside, she stood motionless on the porch. One page in her hand. One reputation slipping through her fingers. And a dozen phone calls waiting for her in the silence. Monday morning began with a calendar change. Madison opened her laptop expecting the usual firestorms, supply chain updates, damage control briefings, a few too many, as discussed follow-ups. But what caught her eye first was the title of the meeting block added at 7:42 a.m. Compliance escalation, mandatory attendance, 9 a.m. No sender, just the legal department alias. No explanation. At 8:15, she got the second blow. Her keycard access to the executive parking tier denied her entry. She had to park in the guest lot and walk the freezing 3 blocks in heels that hadn't been worn since pre-COVID galas. By the time she arrived on the 21st floor, the mood had shifted. Receptionist wouldn't make eye contact. HR assistant barely nodded. The air had that antiseptic quiet, like everyone had just walked out of a meeting where someone's name had been burned into a PowerPoint slide in bold red. That name was hers. The general counsel, a man named Price who'd spent the last decade dodging SEC landmines, was waiting in the boardroom. He didn't offer a chair, just motioned to one and began reading aloud from a document she couldn't see. An anonymous complaint was submitted to the board on Friday afternoon detailing a breach of internal ethics policies, specifically under sections 5C and 7.2, undisclosed relationships impacting fiduciary alignment during a merger evaluation period. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. We've reviewed the materials. Included were time-stamped emails, private Slack messages, call logs, 3 calendar overlaps, and 1 internal surveillance image from the company retreat 2 months ago, the one at the vineyard. Madison's heart did something strange, half race, half pause. The retreat wasn't a formal event, she started weakly. You were photographed, he said flatly, leaning over your direct report, in what appears to be, let's say, non-professional proximity. That was after hours, she snapped. That was during active M&A discussions with one of our critical acquisition targets. You were co-authoring portions of the supply integration proposal at the time. With Alan. The name hit like a hammer dropped gently, but intentionally. And now, Price continued, our M&A partners are inquiring, quite pointedly, whether internal conflicts of interest were disclosed before data-sharing privileges were granted. She wanted to deny it, wanted to scream that it was all being blown out of proportion. But she could feel it, the weight of something undeniable gathering behind the scenes. He slid a printed packet toward her. First page, compliance review packet, subject, M. Grant. Her name in bold. I'm being investigated, she whispered. You're being evaluated, he corrected. For what? For exposure. Her jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. I've never made a single decision that wasn't in this company's best interest. Price closed the folder and stood. We don't assume intent, Madison. We measure liability. A silent beat. Then, you're being placed on administrative leave while we determine whether your involvement presents reputational or structural risk to the merger. I haven't even, she began, but the door opened. Eric stepped in, and that's when the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She turned to him, relief forming behind her eyes like a reflex. Eric, can you please? He didn't meet her gaze. We don't comment on active investigations, he said, robotic. She blinked. Eric, seriously? He looked toward Price, nodded once, then turned and walked back out. Not a touch on her shoulder. Not a whisper of, we'll figure it out. Just a disappearing suit jacket and the soft click of a door that might as well have slammed. Madison sat frozen in the chair, the compliance packet still open in front of her. On the last page was a printed screenshot. Her Slack chat with Eric from 3 months ago. He's boring, but harmless. Once the vendor deal clears, I'm done playing nice. The timestamp was during work hours. And it was tagged, reviewed, Ethics Board ID #00198. Alan's initials. For the first time since this all began, she stopped thinking about control and started thinking about containment. Because this wasn't just a fallout anymore. It was evidence. She waited until dusk to make the call. The house was silent except for the muffled hum of the dishwasher and the occasional clink of ice in her untouched glass of bourbon. Madison paced the kitchen like she was circling a drain, her bare feet sticking slightly to the cold tile. Her inbox had gone dry. Her keycards were still disabled. HR had sent a bland confirmation of her administrative leave, indefinite pending compliance clearance, and her internal comms access was revoked without ceremony. So she did something she swore she'd never do. She opened her phone and scrolled down until she found the contact she'd saved last year under a fake name. Emily, Pilates coach. She had added a cupcake emoji next to it for plausible deniability. No one ever questioned cupcake emojis. She stared at it for a long time, then tapped call. It rang 4 times. Then hello. Madison swallowed. Hi. It's me. Madison. Silence. Not static. Not surprise. Just silence. The kind that weighed 10 pounds and came with teeth. I just wanted to. I know who it is, the woman said flatly. Why are you calling me? I never meant to, Madison started, but she was cut off. Don't, the wife said. Her voice was cool, unhurried. Don't play the remorse card. We're past that phase. Look, I'm losing everything. Alan's dismantling me piece by piece. You've won, okay? I just thought maybe. I didn't go public, the wife said. That stopped Madison mid-sentence. I didn't release the recordings. The screenshots. The hotel logs. The Slack threads. The dumb little love note your husband left on a napkin like he was 17 again. Madison felt her knees weaken. I didn't release it, the wife repeated. Yet. Madison's voice went small. Why not? Because I wanted to see how far you'd dig your own hole before you noticed you were holding the shovel. There was a pause. Then a slight shift in tone. I'm going to give you one chance. 1. You walk away. Quietly. You let this die. You don't leak. You don't pitch a comeback narrative to the press. You don't cry on someone's podcast about being burned by love in the workplace. You exit. With what little dignity you haven't incinerated. Madison clenched her jaw. And if I don't? The wife didn't yell, didn't threaten. She just said calmly, then I activate what your husband gave me. Madison gripped the edge of the counter. What did he give you? The silence that followed didn't feel like hesitation. It felt like a bomb with a countdown. Everything, the wife said. Then she hung up. Madison stood there, hands still wrapped around the phone, screen black. Her mind raced. Alan had gone to her. Of course he had. Not for revenge. Not for spectacle. But for credibility. He knew that if this got out through him, it would look petty. Personal. Vengeful. But if it came from her, the wrong spouse, the woman who smiled at company galas while Madison flirted shamelessly 2 feet away, then it had teeth. It had authenticity. The receipts weren't just evidence anymore. They were leverage. She thought about calling Eric, then laughed, bitter and short. He wouldn't answer. He was already distancing. No more late-night texts. No more, let's grab a drink and talk strategy. He was probably already in another meeting, brushing off questions from legal with no comment, while thinking up a succession plan that didn't include the woman whose name now appeared next to ethics review. Active. Madison stared out the window. The sky was bleeding orange into navy. Somewhere, wind chimes were jingling on a neighbor's porch. Her reflection in the glass looked older again, blurred by guilt, glass, and fading daylight. She thought about deleting everything, then thought better. She wasn't in control of anything anymore, not even the narrative. Alan had played this like a slow symphony, every movement timed, every note sharpened. And now she was just an echo, waiting to be silenced. Or worse, used. The memo leaked at 8:03 a.m. on a Tuesday. No subject line, no signature, just a grainy screenshot from someone's internal Slack channel, already making its way across 3 group chats before Madison even had time to brush her teeth. It started with a single line. Executive leadership adjustments, effective immediately. Underneath it, 7 names. Hers was number 3. Madison Grant, suspended, pending compliance review. No explanation. No context. No protective phrasing like voluntary leave or transitional realignment. Just suspended. By 9:12 a.m., it was on LinkedIn. By 9:45, it had made its way to one of those tech industry gossip blogs that specialized in glossy digital guillotines. The post was simple. Breaking, multiple execs at company redacted, quietly suspended following rumored ethics probe. Sources cite conflict of interest tied to pre-merger activity. Hashtag corporate drama, hashtag executive fallout. The comments were brutal. By the time she logged into her email, the exodus had already begun. She watched in real time as connections disappeared. Vendors who used to open with "Hope you're well, Madison," now gone without so much as a courtesy reply. Calendar events canceled. Slack channels she was a member of went dim. One by one. Recurring invites she hadn't even paid attention to for years just vanished. At 11:27 a.m., she clicked open her flagship deals project tracker. The access code failed. Denied. Her name had been scrubbed from the permissions list. It was like watching her own shadow disappear. That afternoon, she paced her kitchen like a trapped animal. Her coffee sat cold on the counter. Every few minutes, she refreshed her inbox, praying for something. Anything from Eric. Or legal. Or HR. Even a statement she could use to fight back. Nothing came. But Alan got a call. A voicemail, to be exact. It was from Madison's former department head, a man who hadn't spoken more than 5 words to Alan in 4 years. Alan, look, I know this is strange, but if you're doing consulting work now, I think we should have a conversation. Quietly. There's some opportunity. I think we undervalued your operational knowledge. Just give me a call back, yeah? Alan stood in his office, his new office, surrounded by silent gray filing cabinets and warm sunlight. He didn't call back. He forwarded the voicemail to his attorney with the subject line, Possible Engagement Inquiry. Please advise. Then he sat back in his chair and smiled. Because this wasn't a victory lap. It wasn't vengeance. It was justice without noise. A correction. The universe restoring its balance not with a bang, but with a subtle, deliberate tilt. Madison had spent years talking over him, dismissing him, undermining him in front of her colleagues like he was some slow-moving relic she'd outgrown. But she forgot the golden rule of logistics. Everything runs until it doesn't. And she never realized who had been oiling the gears beneath her platform. Alan hadn't needed a press conference. He didn't need a LinkedIn post. He just needed gravity. And once it took hold, the fall wrote itself. The knock came just as dessert was being plated. Lemon tart with burnt sugar crust, Alan's quiet specialty. He didn't move at first. Let the sound hang in the air. Let the laughter around the table pause on its own. His friends, old friends, not the corporate plus ones from years past, exchanged glances. One of them, Greg, a retired surveyor with a dry wit and a long memory, leaned back in his chair. You expecting anyone else? Alan stood slowly, folding his napkin with precision before placing it on the armrest. Not exactly. He opened the front door to the image of a ghost dressed as a woman. Madison stood on the porch in a dark coat, hair pulled back, face washed out and stiff. In her hands, a glossy boutique gift bag with gold ribbon. Her mouth twitched into what might have once passed for a smile, but didn't get far. I just wanted to, she began. Alan stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind him, muffling the jazz and warm voices inside. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees the moment they were alone. No need, he said. She blinked. I didn't come to fight. Of course not. That takes standing. Her eyes flicked to the bag in her hands. I brought something. I'm sure you did. She shifted, unsure of what to do with herself. For once, she had no script. No audience. No lighting to flatter her or stage to center herself on. I thought maybe we could. He cut her off gently. You thought wrong. A long pause. Wind rustled the winter wreath above the door. From inside came the sound of a cork popping and a burst of laughter. Alan tilted his head slightly, then reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a single photograph. Printed on matte stock, the edges trimmed clean. He handed it to her. She looked down. It was the photo. From the holiday party. The kiss. Her glass raised in arrogant triumph. Her lips forming the words that tanked her career. This is what a real man feels like. But that wasn't what stopped her breath. It was the reflection in the mirrored bar glass behind her. Subtle. Almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Alan, standing at the edge of the room. Watching. Expression unreadable. That faint, almost cruel smile playing at the corner of his mouth. I kept the original, he said softly. For legal reasons. Her lips parted. She had nothing. No apology ready. No bargaining chip. No more favors to call in. I didn't think it would go this far, she finally whispered. He stepped back. It didn't go anywhere. It collapsed exactly where it stood. She looked down at the photo again, as if it might morph into something kinder. But it didn't. Alan opened the gate and walked her to the sidewalk like a host escorting a stranger from a rented event. Not cruelly. Not angrily. Just with finality. As she stepped off the curb, she turned. Do you ever miss it? Us. He looked past her, at nothing in particular. Then back at her. I miss not having to answer that question. And with that, he turned and walked back inside. The door closed behind him with a quiet thunk. Inside, the house was warm again. Lit with soft light, jazz playing on a low speaker. Laughter resumed, glasses raised. Real people, real conversations, no performance. He returned to his seat. Greg passed him the tart. "Everything good?" someone asked. Alan just nodded, pouring himself a fresh glass of bourbon. He lifted it halfway, then paused, looking around at people who saw him, really saw him. The toast didn't need words this time. He raised his glass. They followed. And in the quiet clink of glasses and half-smiles, something clicked into place that had been broken for far too long.